Hi everyone, welcome back to Byte Marx. I'm Emilio, pronouns he, him, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host Callum.
Hello, I'm Callum, and my pronouns are also he, him.
And we're joined by a very, very special guest. Say hello, everyone, to Jack Bennett from Oddbug Studio.
Hello, I'm Jack. I'm also he, him, and I'm the producer, game designer at Oddbug Studio.
Yes, if you guys have seen our best games of 2021, then you'll know what Jack is here to talk about. It'll probably be in the title of the video. But Oddbug Studio made a game that is very near and dear to Callum and I, and that is, of course, Tales of Iron.
Yeah. I'm here too. Let me weigh in for a second. Yes.
Yeah. So we reached out to Oddbug, and they were very gracious to actually want to talk about the game. So we're here sitting down with, obviously, Jack. And yeah, we hope that you guys will enjoy this interview and some behind the scenes, maybe a little bit with Oddbug.
Although if game design doesn't work out, obviously Jack is a fantastic YouTuber name.
I really hate being called Jack because it's just such a common name. Like in my class at school, there was like 3 people all called Jack, so I normally go by my surname when I'm around my friends.
Yeah, weirdly me too, but I've only ever met like 2 other Callums.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's always that awkwardness of when somebody shouts Jack and then you turn around and like 3 people like, yeah.
I've never actually met another Emilio.
I have.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, I've been cheating on you with a different Amelia.
All right. Well, the imminent dissolution of the channel pending. Why don't we actually just jump in with the interview? So, Callum, why don't you go ahead?
All right. Well, I want to start this off with a bit of a not a silly one, but kind of a silly one. So, just a heads up in case we don't put a spoiler warning in. There's going to be some spoilers for this, and especially with this question. At the end of Tales of Iron, when you go into your father's room, there's a line that Doug Cockle says, which is that it smells faintly of lilac and gooseberries. So including that, which is an obvious Witcher reference, the Robin Hood reference with Robin the Ranger, and the Metro series reference with the Bolshevik Republic, which is my favorite thing on Earth, by the way. Are there any other references in the game that we might have missed?
Yeah, there's a few nods. Like, first of all, I want to say that the lilac line, that was actually Doug's idea when we was recording with him. I think the line was like there was a faint breeze that blew from behind the bookcase, and he was like, "Oh, we could add this in." So that was actually Doug Cockle who did the narration, does the voice of Geralt. That was his idea, so that was pretty cool. But in terms of other references, yeah, there's one of the items you can find in the game is like a little lost teddy bear, and our first game was called The Lost Bear. So that was kind of like a little Easter egg for our first game, because both the little characters that you take the teddy bear back to actually have similar resemblance to the 2 characters from The Lost Bear. And also there's a little like hint towards Hollow Knight with one of the armor sets, and some of the other armor sets have got little like influences from the Witcher games as well. So yeah, there's a few in there.
That's awesome. It's like a quilt of all your different influences.
And also like there's also like you talk about the Bolshevik Republic. There's like a sort of the puns of the wrestler names as well. So that was quite fun to do.
I think my favorite was Blocky Magoo.
that was actually an inside joke. Like when we was making our first game, The Lost Bear, we had an audio designer called Jay, and we used to play Mario Kart with him a lot. And obviously, in Mario Kart, you hold the green shell behind you to like defend or block against red shells. So that's where that came from.
Oh man, that's pretty funny.
All right, so shall we get back to the more serious questions, Amelia?
Okay, so I think this is something that's hung over my head when I've been playing your game. By the way, I played this whole game in basically 2 settings. So sittings. To what extent is Tales of Iron influenced by things like Redwall and Mouse Guard and there's like a small niche of medieval animal fantasy stories, and I have to really wonder like to what extent is Tales of Iron inspired by those kinds of media? Because to my knowledge, there aren't like games and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
like what's the story?
As a kid, like obviously everybody's kind of aware of like Redwall, to some extent like Wind in the Willows. It's all that sort of concept of like anthropomorphized animals in a sort of society. So that was always an influence for us, but I wouldn't say they were like our biggest influences. We liked that idea and that concept, but we wanted to take it more down a darker route, more similar like we were talking about to The Witcher. We like our games to almost feel like if Redwall's the fairy tale, then we want to be like the Grimm's fairy tale, where there's a darker sort of undertones, a bit more grim and grimy, and the story's not always so nice and such a positive ending. So yeah, I think I'd say they were an influence, but not our biggest influence. They just kind of gave us this idea, like you say, that there's people out there that like this sort of thing.
Oh yeah, because I think it's really interesting to use animals as a basis for telling a story. Because Tales of Iron is a very, in a way, mature story, because it's kind of almost like a loss of innocence, where you have at the beginning a setup of like almost a medieval kind of fairy tale, like you said, and then that like very quickly goes off the rails, and it very quickly becomes a much more darker, a much more serious story. And there's a juxtaposition between the cutesy graphics and like the very visceral sort of impact of like animals just butchering each other,
Yeah.
I wonder like
also just the implications of certain things, like how you refill your bug juice canteen by hacking at bug corpses, which means you're drinking blood.
Yeah, I mean, like that, like you say, that juxtaposition's really nice because we get to tell stories where you almost looking back at yourself or back at humanity, because that removal of it being a human to an animal kind of gives you that space to play with. Like we talk about, or it kind of hints at the idea of looking at monarchy. Is monarchy such a good thing? Like in the game, we try and make it so that the monarchy is actually physically doing stuff for their people rather than just being this figurehead that the people work for. So Reggie is going out and saving his kingdom and rebuilding it. We also kind of hint at, with the Bolsheviks, they are much more advanced technologically, but at the same time they're causing a lot of pollution that's kind of messing up the frog village and that sort of thing. So it gave us that space to kind of reflect back at ourselves, I guess.
One of the absolute best parts, I think, of the whole game, just from a story perspective, is actually going and finding the Bolshevik Republic.
Yes.
Because, like, not only is it not really expected, but it totally subverts basically the entire world. Kind of like how Charlton Heston at the end of, Planet of the Apes finds the Statue of Liberty, and then he realizes, oh no, this is the Earth. And it's like, oh yeah, actually, these rats are just like, sort of killing each other in a monarchist kind of very backward society where like the king's children have to fight each other for the throne. And then the moles are like, oh, we have subways and electricity and guns and oh wow, okay, so there's like a lot hidden under the surface. And that was just for me one of the best sort of moments in the entire story, because I realized there's more to this than what meets the eye.
Yeah, exactly. That was like a really nice point for us, because we kind of slowly hint at you. First of all, you get Jay, who you meet, and you're like, oh, there's a mole, and maybe you think that's just going to be like a one-off character. He's not going to be coming from this whole civilization. And then we kind of hint at you a little bit because you are in that metro area. He's got a gun, so there's a little hint of technology. Then he turns on his backpack and there's music playing that's very different to any music you've heard so far. And then that whole quest is you turn on the power and you start to realize like you say, that there's an extension to that world. Basically, there's a completely different side to it. And then obviously you go off, you get on the tram and you go to Mole Town and you just see that the world's completely different. And for us, that was a way of us just expanding that universe. It makes the world feel so much deeper and fuller if you see completely different perspectives of it. And that was the really nice thing of kind of removing Reggie from, like you say, the monarchy and from his kingdom, and just showing off the world and what else can be there. And obviously that opens up the world to being what other possibilities are out there, what else is in this world. So I think it really helps to world build that section.
And one thing I really love about this game is that with Souls-likes, like Tales of Iron and Hollow Knight and everything, it's so easy to fall into that sort of melancholy, everything is terrible kind of vibe with music and stuff. And Tales of Iron makes a really big effort to not feel as melancholy. Like it has its dark moments, but there's like this undeniable charm about it, and really funny moments. And that's why the Bolshevik Republic was such a turning point for me personally, because when Jay says comrade, I laughed for a good minute and a half straight.
Yeah, well, that again, that just comes down to the world building. Like we want to reflect back on society, but it still needs to be realistic, in air quotes, for that world. So that just felt like almost the right way to go with it. And like you say, yeah, we like to juxtapose that like dark grim world with the cutesy art style, and like again just helps to make the impactful moments way more impactful if you're going from this high of being in the nice violin-filled music of the village after you've rebuilt it, down to this sort of cyberpunky, sort of underground.
It has Russian techno. It's so good.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and that, again, just seeing people's reaction to that just makes us so much more excited for where else that world could go.
Was that always the plan, or was this something that kind of like developed as you were working on it? Like, just maybe guide us a little bit through the development process. Did you sit down and plot everything out, or did you like start working on, like, say, the village, and then added piece by piece?
So we obviously, first of all, the first thing is all of the main characters, the rats, they are based on the game director Dan's pet rats. So they were all real characters. So that was kind of our starting point. Is like we had these characters that we knew we wanted to create, and then we knew we wanted to make an RPG. Our favorite RPG is The Witcher, so we knew we wanted to make something that was like that sort of medieval fairy tale. But we didn't just want to make another medieval fairy tale fantasy RPG, because that's there. So we wanted to kind of put our own spin on it. And then Jay, I spoke about, the mole is actually based on one of our friends, Jay, who is an audio designer who worked with on Lost Bear. So that character kind of made sense for him to be all about music and having this sort of completely different approach to it. And then we knew that we was going to do this big boss battle with Jay, because we wanted to show off that he's got this blaster and he's just blowing bugs away. And that kind of put us in this space of almost like Hotline Miami, which really very weird connection. That's why that music started coming into it, and then that music kind of built up this world of like, well, we could go to down this route with Jay. So it all kind of just snowballed as we started developing the characters.
Well, I can't wait for Hot Rat Miami, but I do want to ask. Going slightly off topic, and just because I remember earlier Emilio said like the children of the king are all fighting for the throne, except two of them aren't, and I need to ask you about this. Why are Chef and Smith not vying for the crown?
So we haven't actually like explicitly said it in the game, but there is, so like you can see in the throne room, there's that picture of like King Ratus, and there's only got Reggie and Dennis on it, and that's because Bam Bam and Rem Rem, the Smith and the Chef, are actually not full brothers, should I say. They are King Ratus's conquests outside of the Queen Rat. So
okay, wait, hang on. No, wait, you can't just say things like that. We need to go deeper. What were their names again? Their names were Bam Bam and
Rem Rem.
Okay. No more questions.
They're twins.
You've won the interview. No more questions.
So yeah, they're illegitimate children, so they can't take the throne. That's why.
That is wild.
That's, again, one of the amazing things about this game is that, like, you could always just look, and there's always more, like, you can always just go deeper with the story. I never expected that, because Callum and I were talking about this, beforehand. I was like, oh yeah, okay, well, it kind of makes sense that maybe only a few children, would get into the, the business of fighting, and maybe the other two were like, no, but then you just drop this bombshell that they're like illegitimate children, so they can't technically compete. It's like, whoa.
And we were like we were like, this is such a progressive society. King Radis is letting his kids just like abdicate the throne so they can follow their passions, and it's like, no, they're bastards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like, again, that's that craziness of like monarchy that we try and highlight. It's not always a good thing.
Well, actually, while we're on tangents and things, who's the herald again? The guy who gives you the quests at first, the really small one. I forget his name.
Doug.
Yeah, is Doug a rat or is Doug a mouse?
He's a rat. They're all rats. They're all rats in the kingdom.
Okay, because there's a lot of different body types between the rats that I found quite interesting, because Doug is probably the smallest rat I've seen in the game.
Yeah, he's the run of the litter. Yeah.
Actually, related to that, was there a specific reason why you chose to make Reggie this tiny little guy, especially in comparison to like his brother Dennis?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, in terms of the real rats, Reggie wasn't the biggest rat, but in terms of story and game, it just makes for a better hero's arc. If he's not the character that is clearly the hero, everything he does is so much bigger and more heroic. So it was just a nice story mechanic for him to not be the biggest, but achieving the biggest things.
Yeah,
I think one of the biggest like feels moment is right at the beginning of the game, where you are just like getting ready for the tournament, and then I think Doug drops a line about how like Reggie doesn't like eat regular food because his brothers just like eat all the other food, so he was always left with the scraps. And I've never felt more sorry for a protagonist in a video game. That moment.
That's still that thing of making it believable, like rats will fight over food and that sort of thing. So it's kind of like giving that reality to this fantasy world.
Yeah, that moment hit me particularly hard because I have a dog named Reggie who, like, and he was sitting next to me while I was playing that point, and it's like, oh, Reggie doesn't get to eat all of the food. And I looked at my dog, and he's just like staring at me, and I thought, I'm gonna kill everyone in this kingdom except for Reggie.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We needed to put you firmly in Reggie's shoes, and I think making him feel that sort of like downtrodden guy, or not so downtrodden, but not the biggest, not the strongest, kind of allows everyone to see him as like almost like an everyman.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting that you mentioned that, because Reggie is, as a monarch, incredibly proactive, because like he does everything. He's kind of responsible for like, and I think there's a point. It's like, oh yeah, later on he would figure out taxation, but right now he has to do quests to get money to like, pay things, and that's a very clever way of making the protagonist feel like, oh, I actually have to do stuff. This kingdom is kind of like maybe falling apart a little bit.
Yeah. I do just want to say that it's very in line with a lot of fantasy stories where you become the king at the end, that I don't think Reggie's going to know what to do with politics.
Well, this is what I was saying to you. Like, I did kind of want to make a bit of a statement about monarchy. Like, the monarchies that unfortunately we live under at the moment, it's like you pay a lot of money and don't get a lot in return as a peasant of the realm, shall I say. So I wanted Reggie to be the sort of monarchy I wanted to see, not necessarily going out and killing people, but proactively, physically doing things for his kingdom.
Oh, I want to see Prince Philip in the streets with a sword.
Exactly. So, like, I feel like there's a lot that could be said about what could be done better rather than peasants paying upwards all the time.
it is kind of interesting to me that the frog invasion, just from sort of a military perspective, is they kind of show up, smash the village. They don't really take the castle, even though I think they maybe could have. They just kind of come in, wreck stuff, and then kind of run away. And that kind of forces you to go after them. But it doesn't really seem like their entire perspective. They don't want to kind of do a genocide. At least that's the way that it's kind of presented. They do want to eat like a bunch of rats, but I don't know, like, what is the deal with that exactly?
So something that is very subtle in the game is like, you go to Mole Town, you see all this technology. You go to the Frog Village, and in the background you see all these pipes. It's incredibly toxic. You need a gas mask to be able to travel through the Frog Village. So we were kind of hinting that connection between all of this technology creating these bad gases that are then being funneled out into Frog Village. So without them knowing about each other, Mole Town is kind of destroying Frog Village, which is causing the frogs to have to go out and hunt because they can't grow food, they can't make food anymore. That's why you see in the background a lot of like farmers looking sad and miserable trying to like work these fields in Frog Village. So their whole thing is like they're coming out to raid and take whatever they can to try and, similar to what Reggie's doing, rebuild and improve their village.
Whoa, and I remember that Jay at one point says like he's so upset that mole technology is being used like this.
Yeah.
In regards to so they just don't understand at all that they're causing this problem.
Exactly.
Whoa.
You guys are really masters of environmental storytelling, because it's very subtle, but once you mention it, like everything just sort of, like the entire game just actually kind of clicks into place, because really it's not really the frog people's fault per se. And the other thing is like we only get the perspective of the rats, really. You know, we don't know necessarily if the war that kind of pre-starts the game, that, you know, happens in the background, if that was entirely their fault or not. Yeah. And, you know, because of King Rattus's morally questionable experiments, by the end of the game, I really was very skeptical of, you know, the Rat Kingdom and what they had done, you know, because it felt like, oh yeah, they're actually maybe not they're not entirely the victims, you know.
It's
that's exactly Sorry.
No,
that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted that sort of, you're doing it and thinking you're doing the right thing because, like we say, we built Reggie up to be this sort of, not like the everyman, and you feel like you're doing the right thing and you're rebuilding your kingdom, but the overarching story of the world, are the rats good for that world, is the sort of the question, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where you get a complete picture at the end, but it ends up being harder to, like, decipher. Like, the situation is over, but it's messier now, because you're starting to see, oh yeah, everyone's not great.
Exactly, yeah. So, like, Reggie returns the kingdom basically back to its, like, status quo, with, like, the rats being back on top, and him having his big red castle, and everything's great. But in the grand scheme of things, is that great for the world as a whole?
Oh, speaking of the world... No. Speaking of the world, in the Bloody Whiskers DLC, we have to fight a tournament to prove our worth again, and one of the people that you have to fight is a rabbit warrior, and we don't get to see anything about the rabbit society or anything. So can you tell us a bit about that? And are there any other animal societies living in this world?
I have to be very careful about what I say here. So, so there are other animal societies. The world is much larger than what we've shown, obviously, and Reggie's story is just one story of multiple stories told in that world throughout time.
Good.
So I don't know if that answers your questions cryptically.
Yeah, no, we get it. You kind of have to keep a little bit mum. It's a testament to your capacity, really, that at the end of the game, I want more from that world. When I finished Tales of Iron, I had a lot of questions about, like, different things. Like, why are the rats sentient but not the bugs? Like, are there like sentient bugs? What's the deal with the discovery of the mole people? I had lots of questions that I wanted to know more about. But on the other hand, I feel like the story in and of itself is it ends in a way that is satisfying, but it leaves you wanting more, if that makes sense. And I think that's very hard to do, especially with a game of this sort of scope. Because, Souls-likes, I wouldn't say they have a tendency to end in a way that is very satisfying. It's more about the journey, but here I think the story actually ends in a nice way.
Yeah, I think that is one of the unique things about Tales of Iron is like, it has a very linear story. Like you start somewhere and there's an ending, where most Souls-likes don't have that sort of detailed story, like Dark Souls or Hollow Knight, Sword and Sanctuary. It's more about the combat and exploring the world, and not so much about this story of characters. So I think that is something that is unique to Tales of Iron. And in the way that we build our worlds, that just automatically creates these stories. If we feed you a little bit of it, then that instantly gives you more questions about the world, and that's something we like. And like I say, there's hundreds of stories in this world of Tales of Iron that we could potentially tell.
And will we see all of them?
I don't know if I've got enough time in my life to make 100 stories. So,
I mean, that's why we invented children, my man.
I know, yeah. I guess I could train up an army of children to start developing games for me.
You could always get a squire and like a bloodline apprenticeship, to tell the ancient tale. It's really curious. I do want to bring this back a little bit to gameplay, though. From your perspective, which is the best and worst boss in the game? Because from my experience, the boss that I struggled with the most was the giant beetle in the sewer. For some reason, I died to that boss way more times than any of the other bosses in the game, even the final one. And the one that I enjoyed the most is probably the fight at the end of in the Mole Colosseum. I thought that was one of the better, more engaging boss fights. But what about you, as a designer? What do you think?
I think that there's different ones I like for different reasons. Like, I like Blocky Magoo purely because he changes so much. He goes from like this shield bearer and again, that tells a story. Like, he starts off as just using his shield because he doesn't see you as a threat, really. He thinks he can play with you. You break that shield down, and then eventually he starts becoming this. He was based around our version of like Kratos from God of War. That's why he has those sort of like long swords on rope. So then he starts becoming this sort of maniac of a frog, jumping around, throwing swords. So I'd say he's a very fun boss to fight, but he can be quite difficult depending on how you approach him. I really like Ratner Rodinson as well, just because he's almost completely different. He kind of brings almost a magical element with like the thunder coming out of his hammer and from the ceiling and that sort of thing. So he's quite fun.
Wait, where do you fight him?
In the crypts.
Oh my gosh, I missed something. And also, is that
he's got his own version of like Mjolnir? He can like cast thunder and stuff.
Yeah, also, that's totally a Vikings reference, right?
Yeah, Callum, one of the secret bosses in the game is basically an undead Viking rat. And if you kill him, you get like a Thor's like hammer, which I think is one of the best one-handed melee weapons in the whole game.
Well, I fought the Centurion after collecting all the statues, and I did the arena fight, and I only have like a couple of things left. Like, I still have to beat the final bits of the mole arena and stuff, and then find that guy, and then go and beat the game on hardest difficulty. But I didn't know that it was a Vikings reference with Thor's hammer, my guy.
Yeah, and then the Centurion guy is called Rattus Augustae as well, which is like a reference to sort of ancient Rome with Augustus.
Oh yeah.
So,
the pettiest of the Caesars.
Exactly, but again, that's just a small little nugget of information we can give you to highlight. Oh, this dynasty of rats has been going a long time.
Yeah, also, I think the Viking rat also kind of hints at like the northern rat kingdoms
Yeah.
because they show up in the DLC, and I was like, oh yeah, because when I played it, I was like, oh wait a minute, of course, there has to be like a Viking kind of because these guys are more like medieval England,
Yeah.
France to some extent, and then oh yeah, of course they're going to be Vikings. I was half expecting to see like a samurai rat because there's a katana in it, but maybe that'll be in the sequel.
Again, that's just another little nugget of information that allows us to go off down these different little alleyways. So yeah, there's definitely other kingdoms. Like you say in the DLC, you meet Ava and Arlo who are from the Northern Kingdom. So you they're definitely other kingdoms of rats.
Wow. Speaking of the katana and Thor's hammer and so on, I wanted to ask, when you were designing the weapons and the armor, did you like reach out to experts, or was this kind of an in-house research sort of deal?
It was all in-house. Like for our weapons and armor, it was more about the visuals. That was something we really wanted to push. Was like you can dress Reggie to look how you want him to look, and it also be viable in a gameplay sense. Because like the thing I always hate in games is like I've got this really good new weapon, but I really hate the way it looks. So,
Oh yeah,
or
definitely.
I've got armor, and I don't want to switch out my armor because I want to look like this. So our solution to that was to just give you so many weapons and armor that there was definitely going to be something you liked and was viable for your situation in the game.
And because I'm a hack, I want to piggyback off of Emilio's last question. What's your favorite weapon and armor set?
I do really like the final. It's got like the red cape and it's got like a metal chest plate. I really like that one. I do also really like the Roman one that you get from Augusta. It's like got the Centurion helmet. In terms of weapons, I always go with a hammer. So either Mjolnir, so from the Thunder Boss, or there's like a Smith's hammer that you get as well. That's pretty cool. I always go with a bow or a gun. Bows are just super fast, so normally a bow. And then shield, I'll go as light as possible, but with as much defense as I can get.
It's kind of funny because Callum and I kind of have the opposite builds because I will stack on as much armor as I can and just go with like a two-handed sword or a katana or something. And Callum will, generally wear light armor and
I fight with the sword and shield mostly.
Exactly. That's exactly what we wanted. We wanted you to be able to play how you want, if that makes sense. Like if you want to play as a ranger with a bow and light armor and dart around, or if you want to go in as a tank with a two-handed axe and take as many hits as you can, then that's completely up to you, and they're both viable for different situations.
Yeah, I'm waiting for you guys to drop a magic build. Which I presume will just be like explosives.
It depends if magic exists in this world in that sense, I guess that's to see.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, there was another turning point for me where I started like telling people about this game, rather than just playing it for my own amusement, and it was when I found out that you could put a beanie, it's called a beanie in America, right?
Yeah, the little red hat.
Yeah, because we have a lot of American viewers, so I have to make sure they understand. A beanie and like a fisherman's jersey on Reggie. And like when I saw that, I was like, okay, no, this is the best game I've played in a long time. I have to tell people about this.
Well, exactly, and that comes back to you dressing how you want to dress, you feeling like Reggie is your character, So we wanted everyone to have something that they liked, so that was just a fun little hipster rat moment.
Yeah, I was just about to say. But one of the things that I actually really like about what you've done is that in a way, a lot of the customization options kind of remind me of like Monster Hunter. I especially love how you could kill like one of the big like insect bosses or something and get like armor that looked like it was physically made out of the pieces of that creature. And I thought like, oh yeah, that's like a Monster Hunter thing. And then I started thinking, oh wait, is this game kind of you're a little guy fighting big bugs. With a lot of like different weapons, and they all play kind of differently. I was wondering about that, because like you didn't have to do it, but you did.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, one, we're big fans of Monster Hunter. We love Monster Hunter, so that's good. But at the same time, it comes back to that world building sort of thing. Like you say, when you carve the bugs and then you're drinking the bug juice, in a weird way, it makes sense. Like, it is a commodity in the world that they're using, made from a creature in the world. So it only made sense for armors that you're wearing to be made from the creatures you're killing. So that was just kind of a thing that gave logic to the world.
I especially like that feature because bugs end up being one of the most prominent enemies that you fight, and it lets you sort of replenish yourself after a long and tough fight. But while we're talking about general enemies, and while we're still within spitting distance of the what are your favorite X things about the game, I'm curious, what is your favorite general enemy design? Like, just a common enemy that you have to fight, gameplay-wise or looks-wise?
Well, the first thing that jumped to my mind was a moment I like is when you beat Lancelot and then you get the bow, and you get that flying Mozzie enemy come in, and then as soon as you hit the bow, it just smashes it out of the air. I think that's quite a nice, rewarding moment that you have. Is like, I do like shooting the flying enemies out of the air and then being able to smash them on the floor. So that was quite a fun moment, an enemy I like to fight. I like also the big level 3 bug that throws the rock at you. Just because he's so much harder than any of the other bugs, when you see him, he does give you that sense of fear. Like, oh, this is going to be a bit of a tough battle.
Yeah.
In terms of frogs, though, I like he is kind of, you do start to fight him more commonly. But he starts off as like a mini boss, like Blocker. He's the level 3. He's got a shield and he's got an axe. I do quite like him because you can come at him lots of different ways. Like, you can come at him with the two-handed and break his shield down, or you can stay away from him, wait for him to run at you and shoot him, or you can just wait for that yellow and parry him. So he's quite a fun one to fight. And then just for the hilarity of it, I do like the jetpack frogs as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I quite like the bug who has the shield for a head. That was very interesting, and also the lizards, because that was a very like horror movie monster kind of deal. Where
the stalkers.
Yeah, we have no idea what these are, and they are crazy fast and really strong.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I would say that they're very unlike any other enemy. They're almost like they've come from a different region. So,
Ooh.
For me, I really like the undead enemies. I know they only appear basically in a very small part of the game, but I actually really like their design because I feel like more fantasy, like animal fantasy, needs to include necromancy. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh yeah, these guys have actually really thought this out, because they've thought out what an undead rat would look like, and those are actually my favorite enemies.
They're really rewarding as well because like you break them down as you attack them, they start to like lose their legs or lose their arms.
And then their attack patterns change. I love it when enemies are reactive to the player's sort of attention. If you are attacking them and they're losing limbs or something and they're forced to change, that's actually really fun. And you don't often see that in these kinds of games. Usually in a Souls like you'll have the enemy and they'll have like a fixed attack pattern, and then you'll have bosses and they'll have phases, but usually the baseline enemies don't really change all that much.
No, a fun thing about them as well is like, we noticed it after the game came out, but it really sounds like they're saying Reggie when they attack you. Like they're like Reggie, which is very strange. But Francesco, the audio designer, didn't mean for that at all. He was just making weird noises. It actually really sounds like they're saying Reggie, which is actually a genius move, and we should have thought of that anyway.
Happy accidents.
Because there's a terrible implication, because if the undead are really sort of a product of the machinations of the king, then maybe the undead recognize Reggie as the king's son, and it's like, oh wait a minute, that's like a foreshadowing that the king has been involved in these terrible experiments.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a very happy accident.
Yeah, it's weird that the game is ultimately a story about Reggie fighting and defeating the frogs, and on the surface level, it's really just a very basic fantasy story of the hero confronting the evil, avenging his father, all that stuff. But really, I feel like by the end of the story, I don't really feel like being a king is a reward. I kind of feel like it's almost a burden because now I know all of these things. I know my dad was, maybe a corrupt guy. I have had to do some terrible things. I've lost some friends along the way. Like, do you think that's where the story needs to go? Or, how would you adjust it if you had a choice?
I think that is where it should go. Like I was saying earlier on, like, we didn't want it to just be almost like everything, like a standard fairy tale, and everything was magical ever after, because that's never the way it goes. When there's a war, it's never just like everything's perfect afterwards. Yeah, somebody wins and somebody loses, but there's still consequences that go on years after that. So I think it needed to end, to be a realistic scenario, it needed to end in a situation where, yes, Reggie has done the right thing for him and his people, but it has left the world in a position that's not great. Because, I mean, just theorizing here, like, the moles were kind of destroying the environment to build this situation. Maybe that's going to become an issue between moles and rats. Who knows? Like, there's lots of like situations now where, in the future, that could become an issue.
Well, I do.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I do want to say, like, at the end of the game, it's Doug Cockle with his beautiful voice says a very interesting line where apparently moles and rats are going to start working together and sharing technology and stuff. And Emilio and I actually theorized briefly that might push like the Rat Kingdom into almost a pre-Renaissance flintlock pistol kind of era. Can you tell us about, like, would that be possible? Would if there is a sequel, would it be in sort of the same-ish world, or would the world change drastically?
Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it?
I mean, make sure you credit us.
I guess it depends how far in the future you would go. Like I say, eventually there would become, if both civilizations became dependent on some sort of fuel source, there would inevitably be issues, I'd imagine. So, yeah, I guess in the future there could be situations that are not great, but at the moment the moles and the rats are friends.
I guess the thing that really hangs over everything is that in real life, when you have two civilizations who are so different, because the mole people are almost in a way a modern society, with modern social structures and things like that. And the rat people, the Rat Kingdom, are a medieval society with a very different social system. Invariably, when those two civilizations come into contact with each other, there's a huge paradigm shift. And usually it's the less developed, less robust society that kind of crumbles. And I kind of have to wonder if, the conflict between the moles and the rats is largely destined to happen, because eventually Reggie, he's a rat, he'll not live for very long. Maybe someone else has to take him up, and that person might not be as, on friendly terms with the moles, but, it's an open question.
And also, you have to consider the fact that basically what happened to Reggie's kingdom is what he did to the Frog Kingdom. So that could inspire someone from there to rise up in a similar way.
Exactly. I'd also put in there that most great civilizations self-implode as well, so it's not to say the moles are safe.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that we have this society that also has this blood arena fighting, That's sort of the major contradictions, I think, that is inherent to the mole society, where, yeah, sure, they have all this technology, but what do they do with it? They have Roman style. Actually, the moles wear like almost Roman kind of gladiator armor, and they fight each other in a pit.
Yeah.
So clearly, that's not exactly a sign of a healthy society.
Again, that's a reflection back on ourselves. Like,
yeah,
we have this amazing society, but we still do have like major blood sports and
Yeah.
fight and that sort of thing.
MMA.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
I wanted to ask, this is an entirely separate thing. So how exactly did you guys get Doug? Like, was it always, did you always like decide, okay, we're going to have Doug Cockle do the narration, or was it something that just like happened coincidentally, you know? Like, I think it was with Wayne June on Darkest Dungeon. He wasn't originally meant to be the entire narrator for the game. He just did some lines, and then it kind of went from there. Because he's very good at it. I think he does an amazing job as a narrator.
Yeah, I mean, I keep saying, like, working with Doug was a career highlight. Like, working with the voice of Geralt, it's just great. Like, he's such a nice guy as well. Like, working with him is so much fun that it was perfect. But in terms of him being narrator, when we first thought, like, we want this to feel like a fairy tale, we should probably have a narrator. We don't want to explicitly say to people in blocks of text, like, this is happening and Reggie's doing this because of this. So we wanted that narrator to kind of like smooth over those cracks and just explain in broader detail and give it that fairy tale feel. And so when we was talking about like, who could we get? Like, what sort of voice do we want? We was like, we would love to have the voice of Geralt, like that sort of tone, that sort of charming. It's almost charming, but at the same time quite distancing. It's dark, it's gritty, it's deep, and that kind of fit this sort of grim, dark world that we created. So we was like, we'd really like that, but he's Geralt. He's never going to want to work with like a 5-man. You know what I mean, I didn't think that was a possibility. So we said to the publisher United Label, like, we'd really like Doug Cockle to do the voice, and they was like, no worries, leave it with us. They showed him some artwork, they showed him the build, and he loved it, so that he was like on board from there. And yeah, he's loving it. He loves Tales of Iron, so that was a lot of fun.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think you guys actually nailed the presentation, right? Because I think in a lot of ways there would have been a temptation to like have maybe Doug Cockle like voice the character, because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, you've got the Witcher, you've got to have him. But no, I think he's perfectly suited for the role as a narrator. And I also love the fact that you don't actually have like the rats talking. You have them talking in pictograms. I feel like it gives them each a kind of a charm that contrasts very nicely against like the grim, dark kind of thing, that you're going for.
Yeah, it fits into the aesthetic of the world very well, because it feels almost like a pop-up fairy tale book.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the main reasoning behind that is like we didn't want text everywhere, because like no matter what language you speak, your reading ability, nobody really enjoys a big old block of text to read through when they want to be like fighting or exploring the world or meeting new characters. So we wanted to try and remove that as much as possible. So obviously that lent itself, especially with our art style and how good our artists are, Dan and Martin, that we wanted to go down like explaining it through these diagrams. And again, that fed into that sort of fairy tale, fairy book sort of imagery that we wanted to create. And it almost becomes a bit of a puzzle, and it leaves those sort of gaps for the player to kind of ask those questions. Like when King Rattus is talking about like the tournament, it gives players the sort of understanding of the world, but it gives them those questions like, why am I doing this? Why does my brother want to fight me? It gives you that sort of those holes in the story for the player to really play around it. Yeah,
it's speaking of Dennis, I think Dennis is one of the more curious characters in the game, because this might just be me, but I kind of get the vibe that Dennis is kind of being set up in a way for being an evil character, because he just keeps getting shown up at like every opportunity by his brother, and I don't get the sense that Reggie is being malicious when he does it. I just kind of feel like Dennis is almost like he puffed himself up as this great warrior guy, but he fails at basically everything he sets up to do. And I feel like that would nurture resentment in him, And the fact that you beat him in the tournament in the DLC is just like even more. I was kind of just expecting him to attack Reggie at the end there. Just like, I hate you. You've taken my entire life kind of deal. But maybe that's just my interpretation.
I disagree. I think Dennis went through an incredible arc in the background, because he was like a drunk when the kingdom fell, and you can see him drinking in the background. And then when Reggie starts to work and the fort's rebuilt a bit, you can see him flicking a coin. So it's almost like he's saying like, oh, He's doing good work. He's helping bring prosperity. And you save his life more times than often, and he goes on you with quests. So I think he's going to become a very protective older brother figure.
But then why did he challenge you in the DLC?
Well, to prove that you're... Oh. Sorry, we're talking over the person who made this game. Sorry.
I was going to say, I like that you picked up on him drinking in the background, because yes, he does kind of get an addiction problem. Like you say, he starts off as this sort of the glory child. You know, he's going to become to him, he's already going to be king. There's no question about him losing the tournament. He knows he's going to be king. So the fact that he then tries to go off and save the village when he's there, and he fails at that, he loses to Reggie. He loses to Reggie multiple times. He does start to question himself, and obviously that leads to this drinking. I would say the coin bit that you pick up, though, is, well, from our point of view, it was a bit more like Two-Face from Batman. He's kind of flicking between...
yeah.
He's flicking between these two ideas and concepts of where he is as a rat. So I guess that's more to be seen.
It's, I think it's, again, a testament to the quality of the game that we can have two different interpretations of the same character, and both those interpretations have, a lot of evidence for them.
Exactly. That's what I was saying with, like, the pictograms telling the story, is like it allows both of you there to kind of understand his character at a core, but it still has this story that you've built up around him as well.
Yeah,
which I really like, because that just gets you invested in the world and the character so much more.
However, now I'm starting to think that he might be like a Rolo figure.
Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Reggie and Rolo.
It's actually really good from a narrative perspective that the first real fight that you get into the game is against your brother, and it has this, like, a lot of narrative weight. You're fighting for the throne, and no one expects you to win, but because this is a game, and because, it's kind of the tutorial fight in a way, like the first proper fight, you will win. And that is actually a great way to sort of show the player the actual stakes, like this world is bigger than you realize. You're going to do a lot more. Because in a lot of other stories, fighting someone like Dennis would be at the end of the story, but here it's right at the beginning.
I think also, like, the way you say it, you connect that to it, like it's being a game, so you're going to win. I liked that because it felt almost like it was destiny. Do you know what I mean? Because you're in the tutorial, you know that you're going to win this fight for the game to advance. It makes it feel like it was Reggie's destiny to become king.
Yeah, and he doesn't know that, but you do. He doesn't know that he's in a game.
Exactly. But it felt nice as, like, mechanically for the player to understand that, which is cool.
I have a slightly grim question I want to ask about Redwort.
Yeah.
You at the end of the crypts, you have to fight Redwort, who is the first frog chieftain. He's like, presumably he's related to Greenwort in some way, and presumably also he is someone who maybe King Rattus fought, although it seems like he was before King Rattus's time.
Yeah.
Did he become a zombie just because of, like, radiation from all of the pipes, or was he an experiment?
So, first things I would say is, like, it's not necessarily the frogs and the rats didn't always hate each other. I mean, why are there frogs buried in the crypts in the first place? So I wouldn't say that the conflict has always been forever, but there was a conflict that started that has gone on for a long time. So that's my first, like, little hint there. But I would say that he is a product of Rattus's extracurricular activities, should I say?
Ooh. Necromancy.
It is kind of unusual, I think, the way that Tales of Iron uses technology as almost a stand-in for magic, in a way. Because a lot of the more fantastical elements are not really per se magical. Even like the frog shaman, I kind of get the vibe that he's more of like an alchemist who's doing science that kind of looks like magic. Or at least it would look like magic to Reggie, who's a medieval, knight. but maybe from the mole's perspective, oh, he's just doing technology.
Yeah.
I really like how technology is actually the stand-in for magic, but there's still enough like sort of wiggle room that you could say, is it magic?
Well, exactly. That is the feeling we wanted. Like, is it magic? Is it not? From our perspective, going back to what I was saying about the moles and the frogs not really knowing about each other, but the moles kind of doing the frogs over with the gas, and the frogs are basically using the scraps of the mole world to create their world. So, like the jetpacks, for example, like you say, feel like magic, but they're actually made from all the scrap metal and the gases that the moles are chucking out into Frog Village. The different weapons and that are all kind of like carved from bits of metal that they found around. So yeah, it's like
like in one way, the frogs are simultaneously less and more advanced than the Rat Kingdom.
Yeah, exactly.
It's this fantastic almost like, I would describe the frogs as like a Mad Max kind of warrior tribe, not only with their aesthetics, because they do use a lot of like junk, but like also from the vibe that I get, like, oh yeah, they were wandering the wasteland, kind of, they'll fight anyone to survive. And yeah, that's great, because you have like 3 entirely separate aesthetics. You've got mole people who live in a modern society with like modern technology. You've got a medieval rat kingdom with castles and knights. And you've got like a warrior wasteland kind of vibe going on with the frogs. And it's all very different, and yet it all works so well in the context of a game. In another game, these might contrast with each other and actually bring everything down. But here it actually just works so well, because you let the player fill in everything that they need to, but not everything, gets explained.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. And that was the great thing about it. It just makes the world feel so much more vivid. It's not all medieval rats. That contrast between all of them makes the world feel so much more alive, and like I was saying, it makes you question what else there is.
Yeah, it's just like the real world,
Exactly.
It's not that there was one single template for what a society should look like, and all these different societies coming together. But that does actually, kind of, I think this is my last like serious question, but like when it came to the design of this game, did you guys did you start like with gameplay and then aesthetics, or did you start with aesthetics then gameplay, or was it kind of like a mix?
It was definitely a mix. Like I say, we were basing it on Dan's Pet Rat, so we knew we wanted rats. We knew we wanted it to be medieval sort of fantasy, so that kind of was the roots of the aesthetics. And we knew we wanted to make hardcore combat, Souls-like, but like you say, Monster Hunter-ish, almost like God of War. So, I mean, that's where the coloured indicators come from, was God of War. So we wanted to kind of mix those two together. So it was like we had these 2 starting points, and it was just gelling them together nicely. So I'd say it was a combination of the 2 different elements coming together.
Well, that's really interesting, because there is a lot of cohesion, but there's also a lot of dissonance. And I think they work really well together, because there are some elements that do feel like a very classic dungeon crawler, and there are some elements that feel like a very different kind of game, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, like, that was the thing. One of our aims was to make a more approachable Souls-like experience. Like, I like Souls-likes. I like the challenge of learning a boss. I like the challenge of equipping myself in the correct way. But I don't like the sort of, I've died and now I've got 10 minutes to get back to the boss to die again, and that repetitive loop. So that was something we tried to remove. And also, like, I don't know if you noticed, but in our combat, we completely removed the stamina bar. Most Souls-likes have a stamina bar, and that's how they regulate how much damage you can do and how much attacks you can do. But for us, it just felt like we were removing you away from the combat. You weren't focused on what the enemy was doing and reacting to that appropriately. You was just watching the stamina bar in the top left corner and making sure that you could roll or that you could block and parry. So we kind of wanted to remove that and have the focus on you understanding your enemy, learning their pattern and reacting appropriately, because that just got you so much more involved in the combat that you're taking part in.
Yeah. We are just about coming up on an hour now. So if it's alright with you, Emilio, I think I'm going to ask the final question. Question.
Hit it.
Okay, I believe you've already answered this, but we have to ask. Are there plans for a sequel or future DLC?
Okay, so I have to be very careful in what I say. So all I can say at this moment is, like I said, there's hints all over the show about expanded world. There's Grey Ears, a White Whisker. There's Ava of the North. There's all these different characters in that. We have signed a contract to work with United Label again, but I can't say what that's for or what we're doing or whatever. So I will leave that with you.
Brilliant. Oh, wait. I have one last question here. Are you hiring?
At the moment, unfortunately, no, because we're in such an early stage of like development of our next project that it's just like us coming up with the concept of what we're doing, basically. But at some point in the future, it would be nice to expand the team. At the minute, we're literally like 5 guys and an audio designer
and 2 rats.
And a group of rats.
Well, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Awesome, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. It's been nice going over the lore. I haven't done that in a while, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of this game. I think we will definitely be I'll definitely be looking forward to whatever game you guys release in the future, because I think you're a great development studio, and honestly, I feel like we need more games like this that are not necessarily afraid to take a formula and tweak it in a lot of ways. Because I do like how it's more of a casual game. I beat this game in like two days, and I could never do that in 2 days. I would still be grinding, a couple levels in Dark Souls.
Yeah.
So this was a lot of fun to play, and I'm very glad that you decided to do this interview. I learned a lot, actually.
Yeah, I think to just piggyback off that again, I think there's a misconception that people have with things like storytelling and game design and things where originality is something that has to come absolutely out of nowhere. It has to be a brand new concept that no one's ever seen before. But real originality is being able to take an idea and change it enough that it's completely brand new. There is no one part of Tales of Iron that feels like it's never existed before, but it's done in such a way and knitted together in such a way that it feels like a brand new, charming experience. And I'm with Emilio. I'm quite excited to see what you guys do next.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, the whole games industry is just iterating on top of itself. Like, nobody is going to have a completely unique idea. It's just taking what other people have done, influencing yourself, inspiring yourself with other great artists' work, and making something that you're proud of.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for watching out there. You can follow Oddbug Studio on Twitter at Oddbug Studio, if I'm not mistaken.
We will link a link to the Tales of Iron Steam page. So you should definitely buy the game, audience, if you're interested in anything that we've talked about here.
Yeah,
awesome.
if you like our stuff, then feel free to subscribe to our channel, check out the Patreon, follow us on Twitter, all of that rigmarole. Jack, is there anything that you'd like to leave our audience with as a parting thought?
No, I mean, thank you for listening. Thank you guys for having me on. It's been a lot of fun. I'm glad you've got so many nice words to say about Tales of Iron. And we're always happy on Twitter to hear people talking about Tales of Iron or asking questions. So, yeah, thank you.
Oh, great. Viewers, if you want more adventure stories, subscribe to our role-playing podcast, Hardly Heroic, where, Callum and I will do D&D style adventures with people who are morally gray and not exactly quite heroic.
Yeah, and thank you so much for watching again. Have a rat-tastic year.
Oh, you were gonna drop that one on us.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.